I was standing in my garage, searching for a socket wrench, when I heard my son's voice drifting through the cracked kitchen door. Daniel was on the phone, speaking in a low, hurried whisper. I froze, my hand resting on the cold metal of my workbench. "No, listen," he said. "The doctor's notes are exactly what we need. Once he's moved into Serenity Hills, the paperwork practically signs itself. The house is worth $850,000. That covers his care for years and leaves plenty left over for us." There was a pause on the other end. Then Daniel sighed. "He needs to go. It's just business. He needs to go." 4 words. Spoken about his own father as if I were an old piece of furniture taking up too much space. I stood in that garage for what felt like an hour. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands didn't shake. I set the wrench down quietly. I walked out the side door, stepped onto the back porch, and sat in the warm afternoon sun. I breathed in the cut grass, acting as if nothing had shattered. I didn't confront him. I didn't yell. I just made a mental note of the date and time, and I waited. To truly understand exactly why I stood in that dusty garage without making a single sound, you need to know what my son and his wife had been secretly planning for the last 8 long months. My dear wife Eleanor and I shared 44 beautiful, quiet years in this old house. When she passed away last winter, the silence in the rooms became absolutely deafening. I still set 2 fresh coffee mugs on the kitchen counter some mornings before catching myself. 6 months after her funeral, my son Daniel and his wife Rachel showed up at my front door with a sympathetic smile. "Dad, you shouldn't be rattling around this big house alone," Daniel said gently, putting his hands in his pockets. "Let us move in. We will keep you company and save on rent." I was so incredibly relieved not to be alone that I said yes immediately. For the first few weeks, it felt like a true blessing. But by the second month, subtle, unsettling shifts began. Rachel started helping me find things I hadn't actually lost. I would set my reading glasses on the nightstand, only for them to mysteriously vanish. An hour later, Rachel would walk in, holding them up with a deeply concerned frown. "Dad, you left them in the fridge again," she would say, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I knew perfectly well I hadn't been near the kitchen, let alone the fridge, but I just nodded quietly along. Then came the dinner conversations. Daniel started casually bringing up memory care facilities, while passing the potatoes. "A friend's dad went to a place called Serenity Hills," he would mention, watching my reaction closely. "They have great activities." Shortly after, glossy brochures for Serenity Hills started appearing on the kitchen counter. When I asked about them, Rachel would wave her hand dismissively. "Oh, just doing some research, Arthur. For down the road." She used that phrase constantly, a gentle reminder of my supposed decline. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse them of anything. Instead, I started playing their game. When Rachel found my misplaced keys, I acted confused and thanked her profusely. I let Daniel drive me to my doctor appointments, even though I had driven myself for 50 years. I smiled at their fake concern, ate the dinners Rachel cooked, and played the part of the frail, forgetful old man. Inside, however, I was screaming. Every patronizing pat on the shoulder felt like a physical slap to my dignity. I thought they were just being overprotective. I was wrong. They weren't protecting me. They were preparing to replace me. Let us go back to that specific Thursday afternoon in April, a day that changed my life forever. I was in the garage, looking for a specific socket wrench I hadn't used in years. The kitchen door was cracked open just a few inches. That is when I heard Daniel's voice, low and hurried, speaking to someone on the phone. I froze, my hand resting on the cold metal of my workbench, listening intently to my own son plotting my demise. "No, listen," Daniel was saying, his voice tight with excitement. "The doctor's report is ready. We can say he's confused and a danger to himself. Once he's signed into Serenity Hills, the power of attorney transfers everything to us. The house is worth $850,000. That covers his care for years and leaves plenty left over for us to finally start our business. There was a brief, heavy pause on the line, followed by Daniel's cold, calculating, and utterly cruel laugh. He needs to go. It's just business, Mark. It is just business. He needs to go. 4 words. Spoken about his own father as if I were an old piece of furniture taking up too much space in his perfect life. I stood in that dusty garage for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only 2 minutes. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands didn't shake. I went completely, utterly still. The master carpenter in me took over, shutting down the overwhelming heartbreak so I could analyze the structural flaw in their plan. They thought I was a forgetful old man. They didn't realize I had spent 40 years reading people who lied to my face about their car troubles. I set the wrench down as quietly as I had picked it up. I walked through the side door, washed my hands in the kitchen sink, and sat down at the dinner table. Rachel was just pulling a pot roast out of the oven. The smell of rosemary filled the air, contrasting the bitter betrayal lingering in my chest. "How does the pot roast look, Arthur?" she asked, smiling sweetly, completely unaware that her husband had just sold my entire life for a startup business. I looked at her, my face perfectly calm, and said, "It looks wonderful, Rachel." "Thank you." I ate my dinner in complete, heavy silence, nodding along to Daniel's stories. I didn't confront them. I didn't flip the table. I could have screamed. I could have thrown them out that night. But a carpenter doesn't demolish a house until the new foundation is poured. I needed to build my exit first, right now. The next morning, while Daniel and Rachel were still fast asleep, I drove across town to the quiet office of Margaret Chen, a sharp elder law attorney recommended by an old friend. I sat in her dimly lit room and handed her the stack of papers Daniel had carelessly left on the kitchen table, cleverly disguised as routine insurance updates. Margaret read them twice, her expression slowly hardening. "Arthur," she said, sliding the documents back, "this is a durable power of attorney. If you sign this, they own your life, your finances, and your medical decisions. This is outright fraud, and we need to act fast to protect your future." I didn't sign them, and I never will. Instead, Margaret and I built a quiet, airtight strategy. I needed to sell my house, but Daniel couldn't know until the ink was completely dry. To keep them relaxed, I leaned heavily into the fragile role they had written for me. I started acting genuinely forgetful. I misplaced my keys on purpose. I asked Rachel where my wallet was when it was sitting right in front of me. When Daniel offered to drive me to my doctor appointments, I smiled gratefully and got in the car, completely unaware that we were actually driving to meet with discreet real estate agents to secretly list the property for sale. The hardest part was the tour of Serenity Hills. Rachel took me there on a Thursday, pointing out the cheerful dining room and the manicured gardens. I walked those sterile hallways, nodding politely, asking about the daily menu, and swallowing my pride with every single step. When Daniel asked how it went that evening, I gave him a frail, hesitant smile. "It seems nice," I told him softly. "I'll think about it." I watched his eyes light up with victory. He thought he was winning. He had absolutely no idea I was the one holding the hammer, ready to strike back and reclaim my own life. Smiling at a thief who is actively trying to steal your life takes a heavy emotional toll. Every polite nod felt like swallowing broken glass. But I held the line perfectly. I didn't slip up. Not once. I kept my face calm and my voice steady. 2 weeks later, Daniel and Rachel got the trip of a lifetime. An all-expenses-paid business conference in sunny Hawaii. They left on a Tuesday morning, waving goodbye from the driveway. I stood on the porch and watched them leave. I knew I had exactly 5 days to change everything for good. The second Daniel and Rachel's plane touched down in sunny Hawaii, I picked up the phone and called Sarah, my trusted real estate agent. "List it," I told her, my voice completely steady. Now. Cash buyers only. Fast closing. The local market was incredibly hot, and Sarah worked absolute miracles. Within exactly 4 days, we had a final, binding offer. A wonderful young couple, the Millers, who were expecting their first baby, bought the house for $860,000. All cash. Absolutely no contingencies. I hired a discreet, professional moving company for the following Wednesday morning. I didn't pack the heavy oak dining table or the large leather sofa. I left all that bulky furniture behind for the Millers. I only packed what truly mattered to my heart. I carefully wrapped Eleanor's framed photographs, my grandfather's old silver pocket watch, and my favorite woodworking tools. As the movers carried the very last boxes out, I stood alone in the empty living room. The silence was entirely different this time. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was the profound sound of a heavy weight finally lifting off my tired shoulders. I had already secured a bright, sunny apartment at a quiet coastal community 30 miles away. I chose it entirely myself. I paid for it entirely myself. It had a small balcony overlooking the ocean and a workshop in the basement. Nobody had forced me into a glossy brochure. I sat at the kitchen table one last time and wrote a letter. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was a calm, quiet statement of facts. I explained that I had heard the phone call in April. I explained that the house was legally sold. I told them I wasn't angry anymore, just deeply disappointed, and that I would only answer the phone if they called to offer a genuine, unselfish apology. I signed it simply, Love, Dad. I folded the paper and placed it inside a plain white envelope. I taped the thick envelope to the front door, right at eye level. The Millers arrived the next morning to change the locks, just as we had carefully agreed. I sat in the cab of my old pickup truck, the engine idling softly and quietly. I put it in drive and pulled very slowly away from the curb. I watched the house on Willow Creek Lane shrink in my rearview mirror until it completely disappeared around the bend. I didn't cry. I just took a deep, long breath of the fresh, salty ocean air. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what would happen when they finally returned from their sunny Hawaiian paradise. Daniel and Rachel returned from Hawaii on a beautiful Sunday evening, deeply tanned and completely relaxed from their vacation. They pulled into the driveway, happily chatting about their trip. Daniel walked up to the front door, pulled out his key, and slid it into the lock. It simply would not turn. He jiggled it, confused, assuming it was jammed. Suddenly, the door opened from the inside. A young man, Mr. Miller, stood there holding a sleeping baby, looking at them with pure confusion. "Can I help you?" he asked gently. That is when Daniel noticed the thick white envelope taped to the doorframe, right at eye level, with his name written clearly on the front. I had written those words with a perfectly steady hand. "Daniel," the letter read, "I heard you on April 12th. I know about the fraudulent power of attorney. I know about Serenity Hills. I know you thought I was forgetting, but I remembered absolutely everything. The house is legally sold to a good family. The money is safe. And I am finally free. Do not call me unless you are truly ready to apologize without any excuses. Love, Dad." My neighbor Harold watched the whole scene from his porch. He told me later that Rachel dropped to her knees on the grass, sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel just stood frozen on the lawn, screaming in pure disbelief at a house that no longer belonged to him. My phone started ringing 4 minutes later. Over the next 3 days, I received exactly 21 missed calls. I let every single one go to voicemail. On the 4th evening, I sat on my new balcony, drinking hot coffee and watching the sun dip below the ocean horizon. The air was crisp and clean. My phone rang one last time. I finally answered. Daniel was crying, begging me to tell him where I was, making frantic excuses about stress and bad decisions. I let him speak until he ran out of breath. Then I told him the quiet truth. I am happy, son, I said softly. For the first time in a year, I am truly happy. Goodbye. I hung up and looked out at the water. Family isn't always about blood. It is about who shows up and who respects you. If someone treats your love like a burden, let them go. You never owe your peace to people who only value your price tag. My name is Arthur. And I am finally home. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Heirloom Tales for more stories of quiet justice. What would you have done in my shoes? Tell me in the comments below, and remember to protect your own peace.